Welcome to the Truth in My Days podcast, where we defend the Word of God against the challenges of men.
Hello, and welcome back to the Truth in My Days Apologetics Program. Today, we have Dr. Adrian Torres interviewing John, and we will continue to explore the topic of bad arguments for the resurrection and why you should not use them. This is something we started yesterday, and we will be continuing on. Hope you enjoy.
I see what you mean by a bad argument for the resurrection. You said there are others. What are they?
Here's one, and I'm sure you've heard this one as well. It goes like this. The disciples could not have stolen the body because Pontius Pilate posted a crack Roman guard for the very purpose of preventing anyone from stealing the body. The soldiers of the guard would have been executed had they fallen asleep on duty, and so they certainly would not have done so. And Jesus' untrained and distraught disciples could not have overpowered armed and trained soldiers. What do you think of that argument?
Well, this one also seems good. What's wrong with it?
Well, here too, it does look good until we look at the timeline of events. Listen to Matthew 27, verses 62 to 66. On the next day, which followed the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees gathered together to Pilate, saying, "Sir, we remember while he was still alive, how that deceiver said, 'After 3 days I will rise.' Therefore, command that the tomb be made secure until the third day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away, and say to the people, 'He has risen from the dead.' So the last deception will be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard. Go your way, make it as secure as you know how." So they went and made the tomb secure, sealing the stone and setting the guard. That's the end of the quote. Now, do you see the problem?
Yes. The tomb wasn't sealed immediately. There was an entire night and several hours of daylight during which the disciples could have stolen the body. But wait, wouldn't the Roman soldiers have made sure the body was in the tomb before they sealed it?
Did they move that huge stone to check that the body was there and had not already been stolen before they sealed the tomb? Maybe, maybe not. But the bigger problem is that the guard was only there till the third day. Remember, the public preaching of the resurrection by the disciples began on Pentecost 50 days later. So they had 47 days after the guard left, 47 days during which time the tomb was unguarded, and the body could have been stolen without the need to battle a crack band of Roman soldiers, with no opposition at all, in fact. And that's why it's not a good argument. We can't overlook the time factor again.
Can you explain what you mean by sealing the tomb? I always thought when you roll a big stone so that nobody can roll it out, that's sealing the tomb. But I think you mean something else.
Yes, well, the Roman soldiers would put an official seal, a governmental seal upon the tomb forbidding anyone to open it. So if that seal was broken, they would be committing a capital offense. So sealing and rolling the stone there is not the same thing.
So you mean if someone opened the tomb, roll out the stone, you can see that the seal was broken. Let's say someone rolls it over and rolls it back. Can you tell someone has been there?
Yes, you would be able to tell. So there you go. This is why it's not a good argument. Like the first one, the time factor, which they seem to overlook, the time factor makes it a poor argument.
True. I wonder why our apologists all seem to overlook these facts, which once pointed out seem so obvious.
I don't know. And what I find even more puzzling, though, is why some of them, even after these things are pointed out, want to continue holding on to the arguments. About that first one, that Jesus' body would have not been recognizable, I found a very well-known apologetics ministry using this argument in an article that they posted on their website, and I emailed them about it, pointing out this fact. And the fellow who wrote it refused to accept it. He actually insisted on arguing, say, "Oh, well, maybe, modern times, we can identify dead bodies." He was finally reduced to saying, well, maybe Jesus had some kind of birthmark that could have been used to identify him. So he has to posit a birthmark about which the Bible says nothing. If there was a birthmark, it would be on his skin, and so that would have rotted away. And in point of fact, as we saw in that quote from the Talmud, anything on the body was not acceptable for identification. It had to be the face. So I could not understand why this fellow just insisted on arguing and arguing and arguing. I think we should never be so wedded to our favorite arguments that we're not willing to let them go when they're proven to be invalid. That's the only way to stay bulletproof in apologetics.
What is the third bad argument you want to discuss?
It's this one. The claim that, quote, the majority of scholars, conservative or liberal, agree that the tomb of Jesus was empty. Now, this is part of what is known as the minimal facts approach, and it is supposed to be significant because even liberal scholars agree that the empty tomb is an historical fact.
What's wrong with this argument?
Well, even if it were true that the majority of scholars agree, and that's an open question, I think, but even if it were true that the tomb was empty, that will not convince anyone. The claim that a dead man came back to life is so difficult to accept that just about any other explanation for the empty tomb, even far-fetched ones, would be preferred. And if you don't agree with that, consider this. From John chapter 20, verses 1 to 2. Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb early, while it was still dark, and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. Then she ran and came to Simon Peter and to the other disciple whom Jesus loved and said to them, they have taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him. Do you understand the significance of what she said?
No.
She sees the empty tomb. She doesn't assume, Jesus rose as he said he would. Empty tomb doesn't convince her. She just figures somebody must have taken the body away and we don't know where he put him. She just thinks he's being moved. So Peter and John check out the tomb and they go. And then after that, Jesus actually appears to Mary. And before that, angels. What does it take to convince her? Well, in John 20, 11 to 15, we read, but Mary stood outside by the tomb weeping. And she's already seen it's empty by this time. And as she wept, she stooped down and looked into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting, one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Jesus had lain. Then they said to her, woman, why are you weeping? And listen to her answer. She said to them, because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him. She's not happy that he rose from the dead. The empty tomb didn't make her think he rose from the dead. Quite the opposite. She's sad because she thinks somebody took his dead body away. And then we continue the text. Now, when she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there and did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking? She, supposing him to be the gardener, said to him, sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. You see, she's still not with the program. No matter what, the empty tomb is not going to convince her that Jesus rose from the dead, and she's not the only one. If we look at Luke 24, verses 9 to 12, we read this. Then they, which is the women, then they returned from the tomb and told all these things to the 11 and to all the rest. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told these things to the apostles. And their words seemed to them like idle tales, and they did not believe them. But Peter arose and ran to the tomb. And stooping down, he saw the linen cloths lying by themselves, and he departed, marveling to himself at what had happened. And then in Luke 24, 19b to 24, where Jesus appears on the road to Emmaus with the two men there, and they said to him, he's asking about what things are going on, and they said to him, the things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Now notice the use of the past tense there. We were hoping. We used to hope that he was going to. They're no longer hoping, despite the fact that the tomb was empty. They continue. Indeed, besides all this, today is the third day since these things happened. Yes, and certain women of our company who arrived at the tomb early astonished us When they did not find his body, they came saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. And certain of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. So here we go. His apostles, Mary Magdalene, his closest followers, those who knew him personally, who spent time with him, who saw his miracles firsthand, if they were not convinced that he rose by an empty tomb, why would we think anyone today would be? Or even then, why did the apostles never appeal to it? In all of their recorded preaching in the book of Acts, they never say the tomb was empty. We saw the empty tomb. They never do. Because the empty tomb didn't convince them. It wouldn't convince their audience. And I think here's something else that's been missed by the people who go with this minimal facts approach. If the majority of liberal scholars accept that the tomb is empty, I don't think they do, but if they do so precisely because it does not necessitate belief in the resurrection. How is that fact overlooked?
You said you discussed 4 bad arguments for the resurrection. What is the 4th?
The 4th goes something like this. All the gospel books testify that the first witnesses to the risen Jesus were women. And no one at that time would have made up such a thing because women were considered unreliable witnesses. Now, this claim is usually accompanied by some illustration of how unacceptable their testimony was. For example, 3 women's testimonies were considered equal to 1 man's testimony, or their testimony in a court of law was considered worthless, or women were not allowed to testify in a court of law. They were considered unreliable witnesses. Or women's testimony was regarded as so worthless that they weren't even allowed to serve as legal witnesses in a Jewish court of law. Or even if a man was accused of a crime that only women witnessed, he could not be convicted on that basis. That sounds really mean and quite sexist. But the apologetic argument goes this way. If women's testimony was considered so unreliable and worthless, someone making up a story about Jesus rising would never make women to be the first witnesses. It would have made their story less believable.
Why do you think it's a bad argument?
Because it's not true. None of it is true.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but please join us for the next part, same time and same place. If you enjoy our content and think this is important material, the best compliment you can pay is by sharing this with your friends and family. This helps us out a lot. Also, if you enjoyed today's program, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this podcast. We would love to hear from you. Thank you for listening to the Truth in My Days podcast with John Torse. We would love to hear from you. Please feel free to share any questions or comments you may have. You can reach us on Facebook, Instagram, MeWe, and YouTube. Simply search Truth in My Days as one word. Again, Truth in My Days as one word, no spaces in between. And you can connect with us. You may also visit our website for more comprehensive material and to learn more about our ministry. Our website is truthinmydays.com. Thank you.